On November 24, 2025, a pivotal phone call unfolded between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, capturing the attention of governments and analysts worldwide. This was not just another diplomatic conversation, it was a moment that could shift the balance of power in the region. The call came at a time when tensions between China and Japan over Taiwan had reached a dangerous boiling point. Naval vessels from both sides were maneuvering near the Taiwan Strait, and protests were erupting in Taiwan's cities, raising fears of a wider conflict. For observers, the conversation offered a rare window into the delicate and often secretive power dynamics shaping the Indo-Pacific. The region's future seemed to hang in the balance, with every word and gesture carrying enormous weight. President Trump was determined to protect a fragile trade truce that had taken years to negotiate, hoping to prevent economic fallout. Meanwhile, President Xi was equally resolute, seeking to reinforce China's claims over Taiwan and push back against Japan's increasingly assertive position. After the call, both sides rushed to shape the narrative. Official statements were carefully crafted, each government highlighting its own version of events. The way the conversation was spun in Washington and Beijing revealed the true strategic intentions behind the diplomatic language. The backdrop to this high-stakes exchange was Japan's new prime minister, who had made unprecedented remarks about defending Taiwan. These comments sparked outrage in Beijing, leading to protests and a sharp escalation in rhetoric from Chinese officials. In this chapter, we'll unpack the dramatic events that led up to the call, examine the conflicting official reports, and explore the far-reaching consequences for military activity, regional alliances, and the fragile peace in the Asia-Pacific. The stakes have never been higher. The Trump-Xi call wasn't just another diplomatic formality. It was a crucial moment in a rapidly shifting relationship between the world's two largest economies. The call followed their recent meeting in Busan, where both sides made visible progress on trade, signaling a rare moment of cooperation after months of escalating tensions. China agreed to suspend export restrictions on critical minerals, a move that eased global supply chain anxieties and reassured American manufacturers who rely on these resources. In return, the U.S. reduced some tariffs, offering relief to both American businesses and Chinese exporters, battered by the trade war. This fragile optimism was a key reason for the White House to reach out again, hoping to build on the momentum and prevent a backslide into confrontation. China also pledged to buy millions of tons of U.S. soybeans, a major win for Trump domestically, as American farmers had been hit hard by the trade dispute and were eager for new export deals. But between Busan and the call, new tensions emerged. The U.S. announced arms sales to Taiwan, including advanced missiles and fighter jet parts, a move that Beijing has always viewed as a direct challenge to its sovereignty. Beijing saw this as a provocative move, complicating the diplomatic landscape and threatening to unravel the progress made just days earlier. Trump now faced a delicate balancing act. He needed to secure economic gains for the U.S., while not letting security issues spiral out of control. Managing a volatile security situation in the Taiwan Strait became just as important as keeping the trade talks alive. The call was an attempt to keep trade on track without letting the Taiwan issue derail negotiations, as both sides knew how much was at stake. Trump also needed to reassure both China and a nervous Japan, whose economy and security are deeply tied to the outcome of U.S.-China relations. All this while avoiding a collapse in talks that could send shockwaves through global markets and diplomatic circles. The stakes for both leaders and the entire region couldn't have been higher, as every decision had the potential to reshape the global order for years to come. The immediate spark for the crisis was Japan's dramatic policy shift. In early November, new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi declared that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could threaten Japan's survival, hinting at a possible military response. This broke with decades of Japanese caution and signaled growing alarm over China's ambitions. Despite Beijing's pressure, Takaichi stood firm, citing Japan's proximity to Taiwan and the direct security risk. China's reaction was swift: diplomatic condemnation, economic retaliation, including bans on Japanese seafood, and a travel advisory. Beijing also flexed its military muscle, scrambling jets and criticizing Japan's missile deployments. The crisis quickly drew in the U.S., Japan's key security ally. The region was now on edge, with the world watching closely. For Xi Jinping, the call was more than a routine diplomatic exchange. It was a calculated opportunity to isolate Japan on the world stage and pressure Takaichi to retract her controversial statements. Xi saw Japan's recent moves as a direct threat to China's regional ambitions, and he was determined to send a clear message that any deviation from the status quo would not be tolerated. During the call, Xi urged Trump to help protect the post-World War II order, a phrase that, in diplomatic circles, was unmistakably code for upholding China's claim over Taiwan and maintaining the delicate balance that had kept the region stable for decades. Xi's appeal was not just about Taiwan, but about reinforcing China's vision of regional hierarchy, with Beijing at the center. He cast Japan's new stance as a reckless disruption of decades of peace, a narrative pushed hard by Chinese state media. News outlets across China amplified the message, warning of the dangers of Japanese militarism, and painting Tokyo's actions as destabilizing not just for China, but for all of East Asia. Xi also used the call to reassert China's red line on Taiwan, warning in no uncertain terms against any encouragement of independence from Washington or Tokyo. He emphasized that any support for Taiwan's autonomy would be seen as a grave provocation, risking a serious escalation in cross-strait tensions. The recent U.S. arms sales to Taiwan and Japan's increasingly assertive rhetoric were interpreted in Beijing as a coordinated challenge to China's core interests. Chinese officials saw these moves as part of a broader strategy to contain China's rise and undermine its sovereignty. By engaging Trump directly, Xi aimed to project strength and diplomatic control, portraying the U.S. as listening to China's concerns and recognizing its central role in regional affairs. The optics of the call were carefully managed to show Xi as a leader who could command attention from Washington and shape the global conversation. Chinese media framed the call as a diplomatic win, reinforcing Xi's image as a strong, unyielding leader who could stand up to foreign pressure. State broadcasters highlighted Xi's firm tone and his insistence on China's red lines, rallying domestic support and sending a message of unity to the Chinese public. The message was unmistakable. China would not tolerate interference on Taiwan and was ready to use all tools at its disposal, diplomatic, economic, and military, to defend its position. The world watched as Beijing flexed its muscles, signaling that any attempt to challenge its authority would be met with swift and decisive action. The call became a stage for Xi to solidify his authority at home and signal resolve abroad. It was a demonstration of his ability to navigate complex international crises, rally domestic support, and project power beyond China's borders. For Beijing, this was about more than Taiwan. It was about shaping the regional order and asserting China's place as a global power. The world took notice, recognizing that the balance of power in East Asia was shifting, and that China was determined to set the terms. For Trump, the call was a diplomatic tightrope. Preserving the fragile trade truce with China was paramount, especially the soybean deal and mineral exports. Any fallout over Taiwan could unravel these gains, so Trump aimed to keep economic and security issues separate. Yet he couldn't ignore Japan, America's key ally, now under intense Chinese pressure. Immediately after speaking with Xi, Trump called Prime Minister Takaichi to reaffirm U.S. support. The message: America stood by Japan, even as it sought cooperation with China on trade. Trump's challenge was to reassure both sides without jeopardizing either relationship. The U.S. had to protect its economic interests while maintaining its security commitments in Asia. The most revealing part of the Trump-Xi call was how differently each side described it. China's official readout focused almost entirely on Taiwan, emphasizing Xi's warnings and portraying the U.S. as receptive to Beijing's concerns. State media called it a diplomatic triumph, with Xi defending China's sovereignty and pressuring Japan. In contrast, the U.S. barely mentioned Taiwan in public. Trump's statements highlighted progress on trade, soybean purchases, and cooperation on issues like fentanyl and Ukraine. The American narrative was all about economic wins and global challenges. This omission of Taiwan was strategic, an effort to de-escalate and keep trade talks on track. Meanwhile, China filled the information vacuum with its own version of events. The world was left guessing what was really said about Taiwan behind closed doors. Analysts agree the dueling narratives were no accident, they were strategic. China's focus on Taiwan projected strength at home and warned its neighbors. The U.S. downplayed Taiwan to protect trade negotiations and avoid public confrontation. This reflects a fundamental difference. Beijing sees sovereignty as the foundation of all relations, while Washington tries to compartmentalize economic and security issues. The result is ongoing friction and ambiguity, with each side shaping the story for its own audience. As long as both powers stick to these scripts, the true state of their relationship remains hidden behind carefully crafted statements. What happens next? Watch for changes in Chinese military activity near Taiwan. More patrols mean more pressure. U.S.-Japan security cooperation is another key indicator. New joint exercises or deployments would signal a firmer alliance. Public statements from all three nations will be scrutinized for shifts in tone or policy. Even small changes in language could reveal major strategic moves. Upcoming diplomatic visits, like Trump's planned trip to Beijing, will be telling. Delays or cancellations would signal unresolved tensions. The next round of high-level meetings could either ease the crisis or deepen the divide. The Trump-Xi call exposed the deep rifts and competing interests shaping U.S.-China-Japan relations. China used the moment to assert its claims over Taiwan and punish Japan for defiance. The U.S. tried to protect trade deals while managing alliance commitments. The starkly different public accounts showed just how far apart the two sides remain. The Indo-Pacific's fragile balance depends on careful diplomacy. One misstep could tip the region into crisis. China is willing to use every tool to enforce its claims. Japan is no longer content to stay silent. Economic, security, and historical disputes are now tightly intertwined. The world is watching, knowing that peace in the region hangs by a thread.